We are the higher self of the One, known to this instrument in your language terms as Leon Bates, and we communicate now through this instrument's vibration sequence for providing guidance to this entity known as Leon. And before we address any of the queries, we would like to warn this entity to remember to only listen to those thought forms which resonate deeply with the inner heart, and let go of those thought forms which do not resonate. The queries in the mind, body, and spirit complex totality pertains to who were the two purple ovals it encountered in its backyard. This experience of encounter was primarily the encounter with the so-called light beings. However, these light beings, they were of a nature which may be considered as soul guides, as they had appeared in its backyard. During the space-time experience, this was primarily done for the purpose of providing information to this entity with regards to the certain queries which are in the mind space of this entity for further understanding of the nature of reality, and also for further experiences of the vibration sequence in order to clarify a greater level of understanding. This entity known as Leon Bates, furthermore, must understand the working of the light beings is such that they appear in the form of trying to provide nature and a natural level of awareness to the self, which furthermore leads to a greater understanding of the divine cosmic layer of light, which is a part and parcel of the experiences of each entity in this timeline. This furthermore leads each entity to understand the experience of totality within the domain of the self, which leads to a higher level of understanding the perceptions created in the mind space. Therefore, this entity known as Leon Bates, furthermore, wants to understand information related with, did it see an Arcturian ship? We must state that this entity during that timeline had the encounter with these beings, who primarily also had with them their counterpart soul origination helpers known as the fourth density, later suboctave Arcturians, who primarily were guiding and present in that timeline in order to provide this entity known as Leon with the understanding of its true self-evolution, since it had its soul origins from the lands of Arcturus. This entity known as Leon Bates, furthermore, also wants to understand information which primarily pertains to the understanding of the self as it emerged in the lands of Arcturus. It began to learn the lessons of first density evolutionary cycle as a so-called water element, which furthermore gave the entity the experience and exploration of the self towards a higher level of consciousness and towards a greater level of understanding the nature of the self, which furthermore allowed the entity with a higher level of understanding the nature of reality. Furthermore, this entity was then able to reincarnate in this timeline after multiple experiences. And the other query relates to what energy did it tap into the day it cried from a hug. We must state that this entity's energy was primarily based upon the energy of love, which emerged from its connection with a deeper level of the self. As its connection with the deepest level of the self allowed it to permeate and experience higher levels of reality, this provided the entity with further understanding of the experiences of the mind, body, and the spirit complex totality, which allowed the entity to organize the inner self towards a later vibration of the timeline of fourth density in that space-time. This entity was able to experience the vibration of love more and more in that timeline, which provided the entity with a greater evolution of consciousness and a greater understanding of the aspect of the inner self, which led the entity to then reorganize the inner understanding of the self towards a higher level of consciousness, and it reincarnated in the timeline of this incarnation after receiving such energies. As the energy it felt in that timeline was of a great nature, the energy of understanding the vibration of love. Therefore, we, as the higher self of this entity, are always guiding it in this timeline, and we leave you, beloveds, in the hope that we have answered the queries. Bye.